Rainbow Warrior 3, the Greenpeace flagship in the Waitemata. Defiant, proud, still holding countries, corporations and communities to account.
Standing here on this boat, it makes me realise that the Rainbow Warrior 1985 and this Rainbow Warrior have never been just about a boat, just about a ship. It's about a movement. It's about resilience, environmental justice, peace. And over there at Takaparawhau Bastion Point is where Ngāti Whātua have always been inextricably linked to the Rainbow Warrior and its legacy.
In New Zealand, 2 explosions have destroyed Greenpeace protesters.
Sank at her berth at Marsden Wharf.
The crew says they first blasted through
was
the boat
missing
onto
after
its side.
sinking, and his body was found
Second,
by
2
police
minutes later.
divers.
French limpet mines sink the Rainbow Warrior and take the life of Greenpeace photographer Fernando Pereira.
Portuguese member of the crew was killed.
What's your recollection of the day of the bombing?
There was shock. And I think the shock resonated amongst us and Ngāti Whātua sort of a little bit more because it happened on our doorstep.
Mum and Dad had visited the Warrior, Rainbow Warrior, the night before. So did you know that?
No, I didn't know about that.
Greenpeace had always acknowledged Dad's role here on Takaparawhau, and so it was a natural invite for him to be, as well as Mum, Rini, to come along and socialise with the crew. I was really scared.
For Ngāti Whātua and the Hawke whānau, it was another tragedy on whenua they had long fought to reclaim.
I got a call from somebody from Greenpeace and we talked, and Joe says, well, why don't they come up here and plant a tree with Joanne?
Joanne was Alex's 5-year-old daughter. She died in a tent fire during the occupation at Takaparawhau. The whānau wanted to plant a tree in honour of Fernando Pereira.
I think there were about 20 to 30 of them that came up, Greenpeace, Rainbow Warrior, and it was sort of a solemn occasion because there was this link, a link between Ngāti Whātua, a link between Joanne and a link between us as a whānau that always supported Greenpeace. And so, very special to honour it this way.
At first, no one knew who was responsible, but with local sleuthing and much bungling by the perpetrators, it soon became clear the French Secret Service was involved. 2 agents, Dominique Pouilleux and Alain Maffard, were caught and charged with murder and willful damage. Despite their 10-year sentences, they served only 2 on the Pacific atoll of Hawke.
From the best information I have, a knowledge of who did it, and I know from the best information I have why it was done.
Others, including the bombers themselves, escaped. Back then, Jane Cooper was working at Greenpeace. When a young French volunteer was looking for ACOM, Jane gave her a room in her flat. No idea the woman was a spy.
My God, this French woman who'd been working at Greenpeace was actually a member of the French Secret Service. We know that because from our flat she'd be ringing officers every night in Paris that were, of course, the Ministry of Defence. Yeah. And what it turned out was that she was actually Lieutenant Christine Carbon of the GGSC.
You know, it's very clever when you think about it. They infiltrated Greenpeace and then they're hanging out with you anti-nuclear activists, eh?
Well, I think they did think that we were a bit of a parochial backwater and that they wouldn't get caught. So I feel very happy to have been one of many ordinary New Zealanders that actually humiliated the French Secret Services and did catch them because they made mistakes.
Yeah.
The bombing in 1985 took place at the height of an international campaign to stop French nuclear testing in the Pacific. Only weeks before, the ship's crew responded to the people of Rongelap, 320, forced to evacuate from their island home to escape radioactive fallout from US nuclear testing.
Indigenous people were being affected by the British, the French, the Americans testing in the Pacific. And so all the Indigenous cultures of the Pacific rallied and said, we want an independent, free nuclear Pacific.
Decolonisation was at the heart, and so it was a challenge to, to Pākehā in New Zealand too, look at your own backyard.
And that's when the whole thing around whenua, as Indigenous people, whenua was important. What they were doing to Papatūānuku was sacrilege. Those tests, Bikini Island completely obliterated. The Bikini Island people in Micronesia had to be relocated. In Tahiti even, there were babies coming out as jelly.
Between 1946 and 1996, 325 nuclear warheads were detonated in the Pacific by the US, UK and France. It galvanised a movement from the wahine of the Marshall Islands to the pro-independence leader and former president of French Polynesia, Oscar Temaru, to our own.
There was a long process that preceded the bombing of New Zealand coming or moving towards a nuclear-free position, but I think the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior really crystallised opposition to nuclear testing in the Pacific. And so I think it helped New Zealand make the next step to really embrace a nuclear-free identity.
What has Greenpeace learnt in the 40 years since then?
I think one of the lessons that for Greenpeace was when you come under attack or state repression, and of course that's not the only time, but it's the most extreme example, and you stand up for something, then people, or many people, will rally to your cause.
And people did in the 80s. Before the bombing, there was the anti-apartheid movement, a push for homosexual law reform and against privatisation, the fight for te reo, the 1984 hikoi to Waitangi, and always a soundtrack to go with it.
Words like freedom from oppression, that's what my people need.
Oh, it was an exciting time. Through music, there came a time when our artists started to talk about these issues. And one of them, of course, was Herbs. French leather. And nuclear waste is coming down, And if you have a look at all those albums of theirs, they're sprinkled with social injustice stories. And so for us, as activists, we were there. And we were following them, and so music played a really big part in telling the story.
There are lots of issues now that are very pressing, and some of them are existential. Where does Greenpeace put its energy?
Climate change, obviously, and the biodiversity crisis. So they're the two kind of giant issues that Greenpeace is confronting. We're also dealing with a whole bunch of peace and human rights issues, such as the genocide in Gaza, and so there's this overlap between them. And when you reflect on what happened 40 years ago with the nuclear-free struggle and the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior, there was a real overlap between the anti-colonial struggle of people in the Pacific trying to have self-determination and the anti-nuclear struggle.
How do you collaborate with or work, I guess, in a tiriti relationship with Māori and with people around the Pacific?
We work really closely with Ngāti Ruanui, who are doing an amazing job down there fighting the seabed mining proposal. We went over to Sydney with them to protest the AGM of the seabed mining company and disrupted it.
You've come in here under false pretenses. You've told us that you're shareholders.
Yeah, we're here for the benefits of our people and the benefits of our children. This is who I am. This is the seeds that you're trying to come off on Pākehā. This is who I belong to.
It's my job to listen to local iwi and hapu and local communities that are organising in Taranaki. You know, I'm Māori and I'm Pacific. And so I might understand this personally, but I have a role in Greenpeace to ensure that Greenpeace continues that allyship and that advocacy for Indigenous communities and frontline communities to use what we have at Greenpeace.
And of course the nuclear issue seems to be on the rise now.
Yeah, so there's, you know, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it was a huge gain for the global movement and for people who believe in peace together.
This non-proliferation treaty is yet another measure, like the Test Ban Treaty and the agreements on outer space for the control of the weapons of mass destruction.
A total of 191 states have signed the treaty, including 5 that are nuclear armed. Notable non-signatories include India, Pakistan, North Korea and Israel.
We're obviously seeing some backsliding around that, and then also the kind of renewed push from the nuclear industry in terms of power generation. So Greenpeace and many others are saying, hey, look, we can achieve our energy needs using renewable energy and storage, electrification of transport and all the rest of it, but the nuclear industry have seen an opportunity to push their particular products.
How have things changed in the Pacific, for the better or the worse?
There is no nuclear testing in the Pacific, so thank God for that. That's a fantastic win. On the other hand, we've got climate change, we've got seabed mining, we've got biodiversity loss, so we've still got these huge existential battles on those issues.
Russell cautions against the need to wait for consensus when it comes to transformation. After all, there have always been well-organised counter-campaigns from all quarters, outside and within.
Remember that the National Party voted against a nuclear-free New Zealand. There was no happy past where we're all in this together, right? I mean, we've kind of developed this national myth now that we're all nuclear-free now, but, you know, Don Brash promised to get rid of the nuclear-free policy as late as 2005, and that's the case today with climate change, just as it was the case with achieving a nuclear-free New Zealand 40 years ago.
Brash was vague, unlike today's politicians who aren't beating around the bush.
This moment in time, we have dinosaurs like Shane Jones who are doing everything they possibly can to stop action on climate change.
We're going to bring rigour and common sense to the hysteria surrounding climate change.
On July 10, 1985, the Rainbow Warrior was sunk for standing in the way of power, but there was no sinking the dream.
At the time of the bombing, I was only 4 years old. So I have no live recollection. What I do recall was at one point learning about the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior and then much later learning that the perpetrators were a government. You know, how big a deal it is that a government could come into another country and do something as heinous as bombing a ship that had people on it and murdering somebody.
For Alec, it's almost personal.
We were really hurt. I mean, it happened in our bloody harbour. It was awful. It was an injustice to all people in New Zealand that to happen here.
But is the story fading as the decades pass?
I think people do forget. And, you know, just to say, I'd love them to go back to those times and listen to the music of those times because, you know, that could be a start.
I still feel that there are many gaps, you know, in the generations that have come after me. But I think that also, you know, we must give young people credit that they are very aware of what's happening now.
I would rather be here than in school, because in school I can't be showing my voice and saving the environment.
And the old guard of Māori and Pacific activists that first met 4 decades ago reunited last year to discuss the most pressing issues and pass the baton on.
When you look at the 40th anniversary of the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior and you look at the history of the anti-nuclear movement, It happened all around the world, right? There were people, not just in New Zealand, but right across the Pacific. There were heaps of people arrested trying to stop nuclear protests in France, in Belgium, in Germany, the United States. So there are people like us all around the world who fought these battles around nuclear free.
The amount of pressure that was put on central government eventually to force the anti-nuclear legislation only came through grassroots organisation. And I think we have to be more and more organised today because the sorts of threats to our environment, the human rights abuses happening in the world, the anti-democratic movement require us to be super organised.
I'd like to congratulate the Greenpeace movement for being consistent and carrying on with the purpose of that vessel. You know, it screams, you know, protest. It screams we are here to have a voice on the seas, and our seas need protecting. And so I'm really chuffed that, you know, our children need to see this vessel and ask the question, why is there a rainbow on that boat?